What if the person who killed a 6-year-old girl never had to break into the house at all? On the morning after Christmas in 1996, one of America's wealthiest families woke up to what looked like every parent's worst nightmare. Their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét Ramsey, was gone. In her place was a bizarre ransom note demanding exactly $118,000, an oddly specific amount that would soon raise more questions than answers. But before the sun set on that same day, investigators would uncover a horrifying truth. JonBenét hadn't been kidnapped. She had been murdered. And her body had been inside the family's own home the entire time. Nearly 3 decades later, the case remains one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American history. Every piece of evidence seems to point in a different direction. Every theory leaves unanswered questions. And the biggest mystery of all is this: who killed JonBenét Ramsey? It was the day after Christmas, December 26, 1996, in the quiet city of Boulder. Inside the Ramsey home, the family had planned to leave early that morning for a holiday trip. Patsy Ramsey was the first to wake up. As she walked downstairs toward the kitchen, she noticed something unusual lying on one of the staircases. It was a handwritten letter. At first, she assumed it was an ordinary note. Then she started reading. The letter claimed that a small foreign faction had kidnapped JonBenét. It instructed the Ramseys not to contact the police and demanded exactly $118,000 in exchange for their daughter's safe return. The writer warned that if the family failed to follow instructions, JonBenét would be killed. The note was unlike anything investigators had ever seen. It stretched across nearly 3 full pages. Most ransom notes are short and hurried. This one was long, dramatic, and strangely theatrical. It included lines that sounded as if they had been lifted from action movies. Even stranger, investigators would later determine that the note appeared to have been written inside the Ramsey house itself, using paper and a pen that belonged to the family. Whoever wrote it hadn't rushed in, dropped the note, and fled. Instead, they appeared to have spent time inside the home. That discovery would change everything. Terrified, Patsy screamed for her husband, John Ramsey. The two searched JonBenét's bedroom. It was empty. Their daughter was gone. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy dialed 911. Her voice shook as she told the dispatcher that her daughter had been kidnapped and that there was a ransom note demanding money. But something happened immediately after she believed the call had ended. Although the recording is difficult to interpret and experts disagree on exactly what can be heard, some analysts have argued that faint voices are audible after Patsy appeared to stop speaking. Others dispute those interpretations, and no definitive conclusion has ever been reached. Even before police arrived, the morning was becoming more chaotic. Friends, family acquaintances, and even their minister were invited to the house for support. Within a short time, several people were walking through rooms, comforting the Ramseys, cleaning up, making phone calls, and moving around what could have been an active crime scene. Today, crime scene investigators know that every footprint, fingerprint, and fiber matters. But that morning, preserving the scene was not handled as carefully as it might have been. As hours passed, police waited for the kidnapper to call. The ransom note had promised instructions. The phone never rang. Not once. The silence was unsettling. Detectives searched portions of the house but did not immediately conduct the kind of exhaustive top-to-bottom search that many would later expect in such a case. The Ramsey home itself was enormous. It wasn't a typical suburban house. With multiple floors, storage rooms, a basement, and numerous secluded spaces, there were many places that could easily be overlooked during an initial search. As the morning turned into afternoon, investigators still had no sign of JonBenét. Then, shortly after 1 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt asked John Ramsey and a family friend to search the house again from top to bottom, looking for anything unusual. John headed toward the basement. He walked through rooms that had already received only limited attention. Eventually, he came to a little-used storage room. The door opened. Inside, he saw his daughter. JonBenét's body lay on the floor. She was covered with a white blanket. A length of cord had been tied around her neck as part of a crude ligature. Tape had been placed over her mouth. In that instant, the kidnapping investigation became a homicide investigation. Instead of leaving the body where it was for forensic examination, John immediately picked JonBenét up and carried her upstairs. It was an understandable reaction from a grieving father. But from an investigative standpoint, it further disturbed an already compromised crime scene. Potential evidence could have been moved, transferred, or destroyed. Detectives were now faced with one of the most complicated investigations imaginable. There was no obvious point of forced entry. Doors and windows showed no clear signs of a violent break-in. Yet a child had been killed inside one of the most expensive homes in Boulder. The ransom note remained one of the strangest pieces of evidence. Why demand money if the victim never left the house? Why ask for exactly $118,000? Investigators soon learned that this amount closely matched John's recent work bonus. It wasn't a random figure. It was information that someone with knowledge of John's finances might have known. That discovery fueled years of speculation. Was the killer someone close to the family? Or had an outsider somehow learned private financial details? Then came another disturbing revelation. The ransom note did not appear to have been brought into the house. According to investigators, the pen and notepad used to write it appeared to belong to the Ramsey family, and the pen had reportedly been returned to its usual place afterward. Imagine what that means. Someone may have entered the home, located writing materials, written a lengthy 3-page note, returned the supplies, and then committed a murder, all without being caught. The note had been written by someone who was already inside. Those two possibilities have divided investigators, experts, and the public ever since. As forensic teams began examining every room, they collected fingerprints, fibers, hair samples, and biological evidence. Nothing pointed clearly to a single suspect. Instead, nearly every discovery created another contradiction. Some evidence suggested an intruder. Other evidence raised questions about whether someone inside the home could have staged parts of the scene. The more investigators uncovered, the more confusing the case became. By the end of that first day, a little girl was dead. A wealthy and well-known family had become the center of a national media storm, and police faced a mystery that would frustrate investigators for decades. What happened inside that house during the night of Christmas remains one of the greatest unanswered questions in modern criminal history. And as the autopsy began, detectives would uncover injuries and forensic evidence that made the case even more disturbing, and would ignite fierce debates that continue to this day. The autopsy would reveal a heartbreaking truth. JonBenét Ramsey hadn't simply been killed. She had suffered multiple injuries, and investigators now had to determine the order in which they happened, and why. Every answer they uncovered only deepened the mystery. The examination found that JonBenét had suffered a severe blow to the head. The fracture stretched for several inches across her skull and was so extensive that experts believed it would have rendered her unconscious almost immediately. Yet, remarkably, there was very little external bleeding, making the injury difficult to detect without a full examination. Then investigators discovered something even more disturbing. Around JonBenét's neck was a ligature made from a length of cord attached to part of a broken paintbrush. The paintbrush handle was later determined to have come from one of Patsy Ramsey's art supplies inside the house. The device had been tightened around the child's neck, causing fatal strangulation. Medical experts generally agreed that both the head injury and the strangulation were significant injuries. However, there has been disagreement among experts over the precise sequence of events and whether the head injury or the strangulation ultimately caused her death. Those differing interpretations would become a major point of debate throughout the investigation. There was also evidence of injuries that led investigators to examine whether JonBenét had experienced prior or contemporaneous abuse. Experts disagreed on aspects of these findings, and no consensus emerged that definitively established what had occurred before the homicide. This uncertainty fueled years of speculation but never produced a conclusive answer. One thing, however, was beyond dispute. Someone had deliberately ended the life of a 6-year-old child. Investigators now returned to the crime scene with renewed urgency. The ransom note remained one of the most unusual pieces of evidence. 3 handwritten pages. No fingerprints identifying the writer. No explanation for why a kidnapper would leave a ransom demand when the victim never left the house. Even more puzzling, the note demanded $118,000, almost identical to John Ramsey's recent bonus from his company. That wasn't a round number. It wasn't $1 million or even $500,000. It was an amount someone with knowledge of John's finances could have known. Investigators naturally asked an uncomfortable question. Who knew about that bonus? Police also began examining the handwriting. Samples were collected from numerous people, including members of the Ramsey family. Handwriting experts reached different conclusions. Some believed Patsy Ramsey could not be definitively excluded as the writer, while others cautioned that no examination conclusively identified her as the author. John Ramsey was generally excluded by many examiners. In the end, the handwriting evidence never produced a definitive answer. Once again, the case refused to point clearly in any direction. Then there was the issue of forced entry. At first glance, there appeared to be none. Doors were locked. Nothing obvious had been broken. The house didn't look like it had been invaded. But investigators eventually focused on a basement window. John Ramsey explained that months earlier, he had broken the window himself after accidentally locking himself out of the house and had not repaired it. Could someone have used that same window to enter? Some investigators believed it was possible. Others argued that the cobwebs and the condition of the area suggested no one had recently climbed through it. Even this piece of evidence sparked disagreement. The mystery only grew. As detectives continued processing the home, they recovered fibers from various locations. Investigators examined whether certain fibers were consistent with clothing worn by members of the Ramsey family that morning. These findings became part of the investigation, but they did not conclusively establish who committed the crime. The interpretation of the fiber evidence remained disputed. Police also found a bowl containing pineapple on the kitchen table. It seemed insignificant. Until the autopsy. Medical examination indicated that JonBenét had eaten pineapple not long before her death. The discovery immediately raised new questions. Who gave it to her? The Ramseys had said JonBenét was asleep when they returned home from a Christmas party and was carried directly to bed. If that account was accurate, when did she eat the pineapple? Investigators found fingerprints on the bowl belonging to Patsy Ramsey and JonBenét's older brother, Burke Ramsey. The fingerprints did not establish when the bowl had been handled or who served the fruit, but they became another heavily debated piece of evidence. What should have been a simple clue became yet another unanswered question. As days passed, the investigation began attracting national attention. Television crews surrounded the Ramsey home. Newspapers ran the story on their front pages. Talk shows debated every rumor. Before long, millions of people believed they already knew who was responsible. The Ramseys themselves became the focus of intense public scrutiny. Some people found their behavior unusual. Others argued that there is no single correct way for grieving parents to behave under extraordinary circumstances. Investigators wanted formal interviews with John and Patsy. The process quickly became contentious. The Ramseys, acting on legal advice, did not immediately participate in the kind of separate, detailed police interviews investigators wanted. Instead, negotiations over the terms and timing of interviews stretched on. To some observers, that looked suspicious. To others, it reflected the advice many defense attorneys would give clients who had become the focus of an investigation, regardless of guilt or innocence. Public opinion became deeply divided. Every television appearance, every interview, every facial expression, every word, everything the Ramseys said, or didn't say, was analyzed endlessly. Meanwhile, investigators explored another possibility. Could an intruder have entered the home? Several aspects of the case supported that theory. There was no definitive eyewitness placing a family member at the scene during the crime. The ransom note referred to a supposed outside group. Later forensic testing identified male DNA from an unknown individual on certain items associated with JonBenét's clothing. Investigators have continued to study the significance of that DNA, but experts disagree about whether it came from the killer, from innocent transfer during manufacturing or handling, or from another unrelated source. The DNA became one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the entire case. Supporters of the intruder theory argued it pointed away from the Ramsey family. Critics responded that the DNA was limited in quantity and did not, by itself, identify the killer or explain how it got there. Once again, no clear answers. By early 1997, investigators found themselves trapped between competing theories. One theory suggested that someone outside the family entered the home, killed JonBenét, staged a kidnapping, and escaped without being identified. Another suggested that the homicide occurred inside the family home and that parts of the scene, including the ransom note, were staged afterward to mislead investigators. Neither theory explained every piece of evidence. Both left troubling gaps. Every new forensic test seemed to answer one question while creating two more. As months passed, relationships between the Ramsey family and the Boulder Police Department grew increasingly strained. Each side criticized the other's handling of the investigation. The public watched every development unfold in real time. The case was no longer just a murder investigation. It had become a national obsession. And just when detectives believed they understood the direction of the case, new evidence, and new legal developments, would challenge almost everything they thought they knew. 4 years, investigators searched for the one piece of evidence that would finally reveal who killed JonBenét Ramsey. It never came. Instead, every major breakthrough seemed to raise another impossible question. As the investigation stretched from months into years, public pressure on the authorities only intensified. The murder had become one of the most closely watched criminal cases in America. Every new report dominated headlines. Every documentary, book, and television special reignited the same question. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? In 1998, nearly 2 years after the murder, prosecutors took the unusual step of presenting the case to a grand jury. For more than a year, witnesses testified behind closed doors. Investigators presented physical evidence, forensic reports, and countless hours of testimony in an effort to determine whether criminal charges should be filed. The proceedings remained secret. When the grand jury finished its work in 1999, the public was told that no charges would be brought. For years, many people assumed the grand jury had declined to indict anyone. But that wasn't the full story. More than a decade later, court records were released revealing that the grand jury had actually voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges related to child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime, alleging they knowingly permitted a child to be placed in a situation that posed a threat and later assisted someone responsible for the crime. However, it's important to understand what happened next. The district attorney at the time, Alex Hunter, decided not to sign the indictment. He later explained that he did not believe there was enough evidence to prove the charges beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. As a result, the indictment was never filed in court. No one was prosecuted. No one stood trial. The case remained officially unsolved. Then, another major development shifted the investigation once again. Throughout the years, forensic technology continued to improve. Investigators revisited biological evidence collected from JonBenét's clothing. Testing identified a partial DNA profile from an unknown male on evidence associated with her clothing. Additional testing over the years produced results that investigators have continued to evaluate, but experts have disagreed about how much weight the DNA should carry and whether it originated from the killer or from innocent transfer. Because of those uncertainties, the DNA has never conclusively identified a suspect. Still, it had a profound effect on the investigation. In 2008, then Mary Lacy publicly announced that, based in part on DNA evidence available at the time, the Ramsey family should no longer be considered under suspicion. The announcement made international headlines. For supporters of the Ramsey family, it was long overdue recognition that investigators had focused on the wrong people. But not everyone agreed. Some forensic experts questioned whether the DNA was sufficient to clear anyone completely. Others argued that the evidence was too limited to identify the killer or exclude all other possibilities. As a result, debate over the significance of the DNA has continued for years. Even advances in science failed to produce the certainty everyone hoped for. Over time, several major theories emerged. The first was the intruder theory. Supporters believe an unknown person entered the Ramsey home during the night, murdered JonBenét, wrote or left the ransom note, and escaped without being identified. They point to the unidentified DNA, the possibility of entry through the basement area, and the absence of a definitive confession or direct evidence tying any family member to the killing. The second was a family involvement theory. Different versions of this theory have circulated over the years. Some suggested one family member caused JonBenét's fatal injuries and another staged the scene to resemble a kidnapping. Others proposed different scenarios. However, none of these theories has ever been proven in court, and investigators have never publicly established a definitive sequence of events that resolved all the evidence. Because the evidence contains contradictions, neither broad theory fully explains every detail of the case. The ransom note remains one of the biggest obstacles. Why was it so long? Why was it written inside the house? Why demand the exact amount of John's work bonus? Why threaten to call later when no kidnapper ever made contact? And perhaps the biggest question of all. If kidnapping was the motive, why leave JonBenét's body inside the home? Those questions continue to frustrate investigators nearly 3 decades later. Over the years, police examined numerous additional suspects. Some voluntarily provided DNA samples. Others became the subjects of intense public speculation after making unusual statements or attracting media attention. One of the most widely publicized developments came in 2006, when a man named John Mark Carr falsely confessed to the murder while overseas. For a brief moment, it seemed the mystery might finally be over. But investigators quickly discovered major problems with his story. His DNA did not match the biological evidence associated with the case, and many details of his confession conflicted with the known facts. Authorities concluded that his confession was not supported by the evidence, and no charges related to JonBenét's murder were pursued against him. The case returned to where it had always been: unsolved. In recent years, the Boulder Police Department has repeatedly stated that the investigation remains active. Detectives have said they continue to review evidence as forensic science evolves and have expressed a willingness to use newer DNA technologies when appropriate and feasible. Thousands of tips have been investigated. Hundreds of people have been interviewed. Boxes upon boxes of evidence have been reviewed repeatedly. Yet the identity of JonBenét's killer has never been established. One fact remains undeniable. A 6-year-old girl lost her life on what should have been one of the happiest nights of the year. Her family has lived under decades of public scrutiny. Investigators have spent years pursuing answers. The public has debated every clue, every interview, every forensic report, and every theory. But despite all of that attention, no court has determined who killed JonBenét Ramsey. No one has been convicted. No definitive explanation has ever accounted for every piece of evidence. The JonBenét Ramsey case endures because it defies simple answers. It is a reminder that even in an age of advancing forensic science, some investigations remain unresolved, leaving behind grieving families, unanswered questions, and a search for justice that continues. And somewhere within thousands of pages of reports, decades of evidence, and countless unanswered questions, the truth still waits to be found.